This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Jen Kidby, and in this series, I'm delighted to explore how leaders can bring coaching mindset and skills into their everyday leadership. I'll be discussing these themes with authors of the Association for Coaching's new book, Coaching as a Leader. Our aim is to inspire and equip you to help leaders strengthen cultures at work for future generations to thrive. Hello, and welcome to this episode in the Coaching as a Leader podcast series. For the next 3 episodes, I'll be talking with some of the authors about their experience and perspective that lie beneath their chapters. In this episode, we're exploring one of the themes in the first part of the book. This first section is about how who you are influences how you lead and coach. It explores things like identity, values, beliefs, and how your past experiences can have a strong influence on the choices you make today as a leader coach. Today, we're focusing specifically on the pull and power of technical expertise as a leader coach. This is the dance that I've seen many leader coaches take as they balance when should they let go of their expertise and the need to have the right answer and tell people, and when should they be more directive in the best interests of the individual, the team, and the wider organization. It really is a fascinating area to explore, and I'm delighted to be joined by Katy McGregor and Ross Hunter, who are the co-authors of the chapter titled Letting Go of Expertise. And they have a wealth of experience working with leader coaches. So Katy brings with her a wealth of experience in HR roles across Europe and Asia Pacific. She's currently in a global talent and capability role where she partners with leaders from all over the world to achieve meaningful outcomes for themselves, their teams, and their organization. Katy is a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development and an ICF credentialed coach, and is particularly passionate about the role of coaching and the global coaching community in navigating the challenges and complexities of the world today. Welcome, Katy.
Thank you, Jen. Lovely to be here with you.
Great to have you here. And we also have Ross. Ross has over 20 years of experience in coaching and leadership. He's worked in diverse environments, including elite sport, a global consultancy working with startups, SMEs, and established brands, and an internal role in a FTSE 20 organisation. Ross has a master's in coaching where his thesis explored the relationship between coaching and subject matter expertise. He's also among the top 1% of elite sports coaches as recognised by UK Sport. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you, Jen, and great to be here with you all.
I'm delighted we're getting to have this conversation. When we were first putting the book together, I knew that this aspect of leader coaches letting go of having the right answer. I know it's such a dance. It's such a battle, it seems, for so many. So I'm delighted to have the two of you to really unpack that and get to the root of it. But before we get into that, it would be great to hear just a little bit more about your career journey and why this topic of leader coaches is so important to you. Katy, maybe I'll come to you first.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. So my background's in HR, studied HR and psychology at university, and then moved into a range of HR business partnering and other roles such as talent acquisition, and then have landed in the wonderful space of talent and capability where we get to do all of this wonderful work, including working with leader coaches. Through that time, I've worked with a lot of senior leaders, and I've seen these tensions and challenges play out that we're going to explore a little bit more today. So that really drew me to being part of this conversation. I have had my own coaching journey. So I discovered coaching about 12, 13 years ago, went through my coach training, and then went on to do an ICF credential and continue with that learning journey for myself, both internally and externally. And I think that also has reminded me how much of a shift this can be and how much you need to just continue learning as you go as a coach. Really excited to be here and to have been able to have this opportunity to be part of the author team.
Well, I'm so glad that you did. Thank you. Thanks, Katy. And Ross, could you just share a little bit more about your journey?
I love how you framed it as a dance because, yeah, it's so much of what I think I've experienced through my career. So I think I've had the title coach probably predominantly through my career, but in really different worlds. So I was a sportsman and then got coached. So I experienced what coaching looked like in that world. And then I transitioned to being a coach myself in elite sport. And it was interesting having the term coach because I think there was some coaching skill within that, but there were so many other things around it. And then coming into leaving sport and working with organizations in a consultancy and then working in a big FTSE organization, was seeing the tension between coaching and reality. Like, I think it's amazing when you sit in the space of executive coach, you've got this beautiful space to be able to have a certain type of conversation, but it was just amazing the experience of all those environments where there's just so many different tensions that just get in the way of coaching. And I can just see this dance being a bit forceful at times. And it's like, how do we start to unlock a skill that we think is just incredible in developing others and giving people opportunities in a world where there is time pressure, there's identity tensions, there are so many brilliant things. So I think that's why I loved having this opportunity with Katy to contribute a bit to this chapter of we've all got our identities, we're all making a transition and a shift. How can we become aware of those things? Because I think the greatest leader coaches that I've seen are incredibly self-aware. They know they're imperfect. They know the world they're in is imperfect, the tensions they're under, and then they can just cut through and go, what's the time that I might step into a coaching space? Really excited to have a bit of time to chew the fat and talk about it.
Listening to you both share a little bit about your own coaching journeys has reminded me that all of us go through this aspect of letting go of the need to be right and have an answer and give that answer to somebody else. We all go through it, but there's something about having the hat of, well, I'm also a leader in this organization and I'm tasked with achieving results and it lands on my shoulders. That is different when you're a coach in maybe I call it a pure coach role. The dynamic has a different sort of pull on it, a different strength. So I do think it's something I'm great to be in conversation with you both about today. Before we get into your specific chapter, could each of you share just a little bit about your own experience of leader coaches, maybe an example of when you first worked with or experienced a leader coach, or a standout moment when you've thought, wow, yeah, there's something about this leader. They're doing something a little bit different. Katy, maybe come to you, and then Ross, be great to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about this, I recall managing director of the first business that I was in. It was a small business, a UK business. And I was in my first HR role, and she was an experienced senior leader. And I found myself in the position of leading the small HR team rather rapidly and somewhat scarily with not very much experience. And she really used what I now recognize to be a coaching approach. I didn't quite have the right label or language for it at the time, but she really, I think, saw that potential in me, allowed me to make mistakes, allowed me to figure things out and give me the space to explore and to walk my own journey, giving me some guide rails and some guidance at timely points along the way. But when I reflect on that now, and having worked with a range of different leaders with quite different styles, I really recognize that as a coaching-based approach. She didn't sit me down and have very formal coaching conversations, but she was coaching every day, asking me questions, challenging me and encouraging me to grow. Yeah, and I flourished into that leadership. So that's what stood out for me when I think about this question.
It sounds like she had a real impact on that formative part of your career. Yeah. And that putting coaching skills into the flow of work, like you just said, she didn't pull you aside to have a separate conversation. She brought it into just how she was showing up with you. Amazing. Ross, what about you? What's your experience?
It's interesting, actually, and I'll probably build on what Katy said. I had a conversation with someone this morning that I think becomes a really consistent conversation where you've got an individual who's highly talented, highly capable, but is known for getting stuff done. I can just see, and it just made me think about this individual and maybe conversations with him in 6-12 months' time. How does that person who has this identity about brilliant at something, feels brilliant about giving people answers, gets a release of dopamine by this kind of short-term hit of solving a problem, but then this person truly needs to step into a new space where they need to start to let go of it. And I think that's what I've noticed about the greatest leaders. Sometimes it happens, I've got an example where serendipitously it happened where an individual moved into a role where they weren't the expert. By moving into a role when they weren't the expert, their mode of survival had to be coaching. And actually, I think it's even more skill when you are the subject matter expert and you have to transition through your career and you have to deliberately let it go. And I've seen examples of that happening and the impact that it happens around people and the impact also that happens to the individual. They get to transition and move through their career and realize they can have a wider impact on so many people than maybe just solving that one problem. So your question made me think of a conversation this morning and how I could envisage this individual in 12 months' time if they actually go on this journey of maybe just letting their identity go a bit, being known for something different and the wider impact that they could have.
That identity shift, it's huge, isn't it? And this is where one of the things that stands out to me in your chapter is that you talk about practical ways in which a leader coach can let go of being right and some of the things that they can ask. But what you also touch on is that much deeper shift, that almost helping someone shift their belief about the value that they bring. It's not about now having the right answer. It's about something else. And that's a much deeper shift and change. It feels a perfect moment to get into the real meat of your chapter. So Ross, maybe if you can just share a little bit about this theme and how you've talked about it in the chapter that you've written with Katy.
It starts like the theme that you mentioned at the beginning. Who you are is how you lead and coach. And so I think we probably build on chapter 1 and just go through that identity shift. And there are just so many different things and so many layers to our identity. So it can be easy probably to go to organizations where people are subject matter experts. Effectively, sometimes when they become leaders, their job description is ripped up and they're given this new one that requires very different capabilities. And some people are comfortable stepping into that space, but there are so many different identity shifts that we wanted to discuss and talk about. We think about our education. We're ingrained and conditioned to have the answer. We're rewarded for giving good answers. So why would we not go through our life feeling like that's the right way to go? We explore the feeling of a leader going, you are known for being brilliant at giving answers. You are known for solving problems. So letting go of that can feel uncertain. You start to lose your status. And what we wanted to try and unpick was we're not perfect as human beings. We've got this evolution and this biology. The biology tells us that we release this great hormone if we give someone an answer, dopamine. If it feels good, we're going to continue to do it. Why would we stop? And also, if we think about our survival, we used to survive in groups by being the highest status. So if we give people the answer, we probably have the highest status. We're the most powerful person in the room. But actually what we're noticing now is with the complex problems the world is trying to solve, how can me being the answer giver be the solution to that? So we hope through the chapter there's some opportunities where individuals can start to recognize themselves. And I think that's the work that often we do as coaches when we're coaching leaders is how do we get them to raise a mirror on themselves and going, the behaviors that I'm doing now aren't actually serving me very well, and they're probably not serving other people that well. And I'm caught between this loggerhead of being really busy and having no time. So how do we start to just unlock that for the individual? And often it comes from us going, okay, yeah, how do we let go of expertise and knowledge? And what value is it for me and what value is it for people around us?
There's so much to it. Katy, what would you add to what Ross has shared?
I think it's one of the big tensions that we see in leaders, and particularly leaders who are at that stage where they're perhaps in their first very meaty role where they've had a fast growth trajectory. They've been really well rewarded. They're highly competent, smart, effective leaders, and they've been given perhaps their first general management type role. And then now challenged with all of the other elements of delivery that take into account the people factor. So they need to be looking at the numbers, they need to be looking at the results, but they also need to be looking at engagement as well. And they need to be thinking about what is going to motivate, help drive the teams to get to that performance, because they can't do everything themselves any longer. I've seen that multiple times in senior leaders making that transition into those first big roles and the tension that they feel and how hard it is to let go. So I think there's something about developing this skill set and really honing this skill set from very early in your career as a leader. It just makes it so much easier when you come to get into some of those bigger roles if you've already got this skill set and you're really comfortable with it. I think the other thing that we really wanted to explore in the chapter is what's happening in the broader environment. We think about what's going on in the world, the geopolitics, the macroeconomic environment, the climate. The role of managers are now not neatly defined in a very narrow bucket. There's going to be all of these things coming into their everyday conversations. what we've seen with the speed of generative AI and how fast that is really coming up to speed, even with things like coaching and how well AI can coach. I think the role of managers and the role of the expertise in those managers is shifting so rapidly. Even from the time when we wrote this book to now, things have moved on incredibly quickly. So that's challenging the very nature of the expertise and how it can be used. So it posed some really interesting questions for us as we were writing it, and it forced us to really think about these things.
And Katie, it's really interesting as well, just jumping on that quickly, that how often do we find leaders move organizations to reinvent themselves? Because in reality, they reinvent themselves because they're known for a certain thing and they go and step into a different space. And I'm spending time with a leader at the moment who's been in an organization for 31 years. And he's got all of these different identities through the business that people know him for. And I love the point that you just said there around how do you start to build that capability and skill earlier? And also, how do we demystify it? It's not a really big, dark art. Are you brilliant at asking? We're generally quite curious. Can you ask a question? Can you give a piece of feedback that's at the right moment? It doesn't need to be an hour-long conversation. So I think there's some demystifying as well that tends to go on. This isn't a really complex capability to build.
How, in your experience, does one begin to make that shift? Because you both painted such a vivid picture of somebody who's been rewarded and recognised for being the expert and on the basis of their expertise. So at that point where they maybe find themselves in a role where that's not going to be enough, what are some of the things they can just start to do to shift that balance?
I think the first thing is this kind of raise of awareness. And I hold my hand up so much when I've spent some time consulting in organizations previously. I had such an evangelical view of what coaching was. This blue sky thinking, actually, I'm sure that we can spend much more time coaching. Actually, when you get into the nitty gritty of an organization, there's tensions and complexity when you've got authority over individuals. You've got the same email address. You've got all of these things at play. I think the first thing that I've noticed works really well is us understanding our biology and our imperfections, of just going, we've all got action bias. So we all really like to do stuff, get stuff done quickly. So what we're going to do first, we're probably going to tell someone the answer. We all love having higher status, like that's wired into our biology over thousands of years. Why would we not give people answers? We're told that knowledge is power. So why would we not give people the answers? There's all these things at play. So I think the first step that hopefully we go through in the chapter is maybe just getting leaders to ask themselves some questions to start to identify where they are. But also, if you start to think further forwards, leaders' roles are never going to get easier. They're probably going to get more complex. They're probably going to get further away from their expertise. And this will be one skill that will enable them to have an impact on a huge amount of people. Me just telling them the answer to 1,000 people, I'm just going to alienate myself. So I think there's something around just firstly that raise of awareness.
I think just building on that, just really starting small. Back to my example about the managing director, it wasn't about an hour-long executive coaching style conversation. It was a couple of minutes here, it was a couple of minutes there. It might have even been one question that I went away to think about. So some of those really curious questions that our leaders can just start to ask and start to lead with that approach. And just take a few breaths, count to 10, whatever it is that you need to do to just not jump in for that moment. And literally, I've seen leaders almost sitting on their hands, just physically holding themselves back from jumping in with the answer. But just the power of just opening up with one or two questions. And then the magic that happens in coaching conversations where the conversation just goes where you didn't expect it. And I think once they see that and they start to realize, actually, that feels as good as me giving the answer, and I can see the person in front of me's eyes lighting up because no one's ever asked them that before. No one's ever spent 10 minutes just being curious without judgment about who they are and what they want and how they like to learn, whatever the in is. But just start small. It doesn't have to be perfect. Start with something, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable.
Jen, can I share a personal story on that, if that's all right?
Please do.
I would probably go, when I was coaching in sport, I think when I reflect now, I think I spent 6 or 7 years just being a teacher and a mentor because I was just trying to create players in the same mold that I was. And that was my version of coaching. what it took was, and it felt good. It felt good giving people answers. It felt good. And ultimately, we were probably getting to a better place. It took me to get a role in sport where actually I wasn't the expert, that completely changed my perspective of coaching and feeling of coaching overnight. So I got a role as head coach of the England blind cricket team. And in my first coaching session, I turned up and I realised the game is completely different. Anyone who likes cricket or doesn't like cricket, the ball rolls on the ground, which is different. It's got ball bearings in it. I'm not visually impaired. And at that point, the thing that I had, my expertise, my knowledge of cricket was ripped out of my head, and it was sink or swim. And actually the players looked at me and they were like, here comes another person from mainstream cricket who's going to teach us their way of version of events. And actually that was my pivotal point to go, there's another way. If I'm curious, if I ask questions, if I know ceiling and potential, because I don't know what potential is like. And actually the best thing that I got there was just this ultimate feeling, which I now recognize as this release of oxytocin, where you've got a connection between people that's much longer lasting than this dopamine hit. So I love Katie's point there. It may be you layer on one question, provide a bit of feedback, and you go, how can we do this better? What's our options from here? And then you as the coach, the leader coach, might just get this different feeling that isn't the dopamine hit, that actually then starts to create this beautiful cycle. And I think it is maybe just one small starting point, one bit of silence. But I had the fortune of having quite an extreme experience that completely changed my perspective. So it might just be some small moments that change the way that individuals operate.
That point, sorry, I was just going to add on, build on the feedback piece. I think that's another thing that leaders can do really easily. Just checking in with their teams. How's my style working for you? What do you want more of, less of? Maybe shows a little bit of vulnerability. I know I can be directive when I'm under pressure. Is that helpful? Tell me how this is working for you, and just open that door for people to say, actually, I'd love a bit more coaching, or I'd love a bit more this or that. And when you can start the dialogue rather than just being one-way traffic, that's when you really start to build the relationships. And then that's your foundation of trust to build from there. And that can just be so powerful.
You've both touched on almost trust and leap. To start doing it and experience the impact and then build on that, because once you begin to feel how it feels great to help somebody else solve a problem, find their own way through, then that it's almost switching out the dopamine and switching in the oxytocin. It feels good. When you think about the day-to-day life of someone who's maybe leading a team, maybe leading a department, what do you see as some of those everyday moments? Going back to something you said, Katie, right at the beginning, it's bringing this into your work isn't just about let's go off and have a 30-minute coaching conversation. It really is in the flow of what you're doing every day anyway. What are some of those kind of everyday in the flow of work moments when a leader can just bring in, whether it's a different way of listening or a different way of asking a question or a pause? What do you see as some of those key moments?
Yeah, so if you think about our kind of employee journey, there's coaching moments, and we talked a lot in the projects Ross and I worked on together. We talked a lot about coachable moments, and it can literally be that, just a moment. It could be in the back of a taxi after a customer visit. Let's share some feedback. What did I observe? Ask some questions. It could be around perhaps something that someone's preparing for. So maybe there's a big meeting or a presentation that someone's come to you for advice on, preparing for, and instead of just doling out the advice, it's asking some questions and just balancing that expertise sharing with that coaching approach. Development, of course, lends itself extremely well to coaching. And I think for a lot of organizations, that's the hook in, because it tends to be quite a positive conversation. People will tend to want to have those kind of conversations. Any kind of developmental coaching is a great place to start. And we have narrowed this down in organizations to specific behaviors rather than asking our leaders to think about big coaching conversations. And yes, we give them some structure and guidance around what a whole conversation can look like, but we really start with those individual skills and building that foundation of trust, seeing that potential in people, as Ross mentioned, suspending judgment, those basic foundational coaching skills that do come together in big conversations, but can also be levers that you can pull in any particular moment. Yeah, that's where we've started.
It gets me to the chicken and egg scenario. What comes first? Is it relationship or is it coaching? And I think, Katie, as I was listening to you there, it was making me think as well, I think one of the tensions that I notice leaders come up against is my people aren't very coachable. So there becomes almost a bit of abrasion, or it becomes a bit clunky to start with. They start to ask a question, they might change their behaviour slightly. I think there's something as well around how do we create people that feel comfortable to be coached? And I think that's a journey. So I think when I work with leaders in organisations is having the conversation, go, every response is a bit of data for you to understand. It's a bit of an experiment. So if I ask a coaching question that might be on the end of some feedback and I get no response, what's that telling me? Is it telling me that I might need to invest a bit more in the relationship so this person feels comfortable to share a bit more? They may not be used to me asking a coaching question, so how do I get them comfortable with it? And I wonder sometimes as well whether we can just get a bit more explicit about it. Everyone knows that a leader's role within their job description says coaching. So why might we not say occasionally, look, this feels like a brilliant coaching moment. Is this the opportunity to have that? And Jen, I'd probably go as well. If we can put ourselves in other people's shoes, we know there's times when we might feel it's the right time to coach, but there may be emotion. So how do we start to that? And I think there's some brilliant environments that just take the emotion out of a situation and go, well, actually, let's let it settle for 48 hours. And that's the time that we might go, look, we noticed this happened a couple of days ago. Look, we can learn from this. There's some great learning from it. Let's just have 5 minutes. Is this time for a coaching conversation? If they say no, again, it's another bit of data, isn't it, to start to understand about that individual, going, how can I enable this person to feel more coachable? And what is it that I can start to do? And I really love the idea. It's the same as cleaning your teeth, isn't it? Like all of us are told to floss our teeth. It's like just floss one tooth to start with. And then over time, you'll start to invest a bit more energy and time into it. Maybe if you're thinking about some of those consistent meetings that we're having now, just setting the team up and saying, look, what I'd love to do after each meeting is I'm going to ask a question and let's just have a conversation. What can we do better in these meetings? And then you start to create an environment where people are comfortable in sharing. And it might need a bit of a setup to start with, which feels like you're being a bit too deliberate, but I think it's really important. Be a bit explicit, set people up for success, and then everyone starts to feel the positive energy of you stepping into a coaching space.
And what would you say to a leader who either thinks, well, if I do that, no one's going to answer the question. They're so used to me leading the meeting, giving the answers. When I ask a question, nobody offers anything. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe in that situation?
I think I would go to, my first question would be, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years' time? So that behaviour, the environment they're creating is always going to be limiting. Imagine if we had a conversation with that leader, Jen, they would go, I'm really busy, I've got no time, I keep on putting other people's fires out. Almost your duty is to create independence rather than dependence. And it sounds like there's dependence here. So if people are dependent on us, I'm a parent, we've probably had a lot of dependency with our children being very dependent on us, and it's amazing, but also that comes with a lot of pressure. So my question might be to that leader, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years' time? And often they'll say, actually, I'd like to be in this position. And that might be a team of 10, but a hierarchy of 50, 60 people. So for you to be brilliant in that role, what you're going to need, you can't be into the details. So I think there's something around, it won't happen overnight. And I know people talk from a sporting capacity of some elite coaches say, I want to make myself redundant. That's success because you've created people who are independent that don't need you. So it allows them to step into a different space. So I think I might start with a bit of challenge to the coach or the leader coach of going, where do you want to be? And is this going to serve you well to do that? And often the answer is no. Coaching is a skill that will enable them to make further steps. And there are other skills as well, Jen. I don't want to be evangelical and go, I think coaches need to push at times. They need to be direct. They do need to tell people. But this is another almost arrow that they've got in their quiver to be able to pull out and go, okay, so is this the right time? Okay, it is. But fundamentally, we know from a generational point of view, coaching is fundamental to future generations. You won't survive, I don't think, as a leader unless you've got this capability. But we might have experienced something different, but it's different now.
I was going to build on that to also think about the system that they're operating in and how are you setting up that team to work in a way that's going to deliver the results that you want. So if the goal is for that team to be more independent, how are we giving them those opportunities to become more independent? How are we getting out of the way as a more senior leader so that people can raise questions, people can have the conversations that they need to have. I love that idea of we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. So what can you put in place to make sure that it's easy to do the things that you want to do and to achieve those outcomes that you want to do? So maybe it's really simple things like rotating the chair or everyone coming prepared with some feedback, or those little things that you might just build into the way that you work every day. It can be a question at the end of an email. It can be a Teams message. It can be whatever you use in the flow of work to just really start to embed these behaviours and to just make it feel normal and real for people. It's really in the flow. I think when we've looked at bringing coaching more into organisations, the barriers or the perceived barriers are really about the formality of coaching or the perceived formality of it, the time that it takes. And actually, when you start to unpack those and show people a different way where coaching really can be part and parcel of a leader's role, can be part and parcel of everyday conversations, people pretty quickly start to see the benefits of that. And the appetite for coaching, I think, just grows exponentially from there. And that's the exciting bit, I think, for me to see when people just get it and start to run with it themselves.
I wonder as well, how many times do we have conversations with leaders and you actually explore what coaching is, what are the elements of it? So we can provide feedback, we can question, we can listen, we can believe in people's potential. If you were a fly on the wall and you observe them over 3 or 4 weeks, they would be doing lots of those things already. But I wonder sometimes when they don't associate with coaching, there isn't a deliberateness to it. And I think sometimes I find once you start to raise that awareness of it not being a dark art and it's caring about and serving someone else, lots of leaders are doing some of these brilliant bits already, but they just don't quite label it. It gets blurred in so many different things. And I think sometimes that fills them with confidence of going, it's small shifts rather than huge shifts.
Yeah.
And intentionality towards doing it.
Yeah. And rewarding those behaviours. So if we think about what we started with, why we might want to use our expertise, it's because that's what we've been rewarded for. If we can start to build systems that reward and recognise these kind of behaviours, as much as recognising expertise, recognising people passing on that expertise and really thinking about a more fluid way of approaching leadership, then people start to feel that the senior leaders in my organisation want me to behave in this way and I will be rewarded as much as for my expertise.
I wonder as well if we can get people to, always on my mind is if I tell someone the answer, I think I'm subconsciously telling them that I don't believe you'll ever get to that answer. So there's something around, even to the point of maybe we always look at coaching as, you're going to go open questions and you're going to explore and then you're going to funnel down, you're going to weave this magic. Even giving people 4 or 5 options. Here's 4 or 5 options and I'd love to get your thoughts on what you would do at this point. You're giving people choice. Are you giving them some independence where they're just then sharing, maybe I'll do this? That surely shows belief in their potential. You think they can get to an answer. So sometimes it's those things as well, like how we are maybe seeing all of our organisations want people to be engaged. We know great engaged workforces. It's like, well, how do we believe in their potential a bit more? And actually, it's sometimes just skill-based. If I don't give you the answer, I ask you a question. I think you've got it somewhere in there.
Are there times when it's the right thing to hold on to technical expertise as a leader? And how do you judge?
I love the thinking. When my daughters learn to swim, I put them in the pool with a swimming teacher, not a swimming coach. Because there's a time of course, we've all been in those places where a questioning approach can be really, are we noticing, are we sensing the frustration in someone? So it's understanding, are they coming to me for the answer because it's lazy, because we are human? We like people to give us answers as well. So there's that conundrum going on, isn't there? There's me coming to you, you give me the answer, my life's easier, your life's easier, we both feel good. The long-term sustainability within that isn't there. So I think there's points where once you start to break down, is this person just coming to me for habit? And actually, in reality, do I need to break that habit? Is there something around capability? Of course, if there's something around capability, there are so many other arrows you might want to use. Yes, you might want to mentor because that's what they need at that stage. And I think that ultimately the privilege and gift that leaders have, but noticing and experimenting with it, we will probably pull from the same files in our brains, the same way of behaving. We continue down the same path. Maybe try something different. maybe actually if you're coaching a huge amount with your team, actually maybe step into a mentoring space for a little bit, see what the response is, and everything becomes a bit of an experiment. But my shift has been huge on this, of coming from a coaching world, consulting in organizations, being really evangelical and going, of course you coach, but actually deliverables, time, the way that we're working, there are things that are getting in the way of coaching the whole time. It's about great choice. And I think we only make great choices when we try things out and we see what works. And ultimately, I think there's a choice.
Yeah. And spending your time, precious time, as a leader on the things that are your unique contributions. So if I think about back to what we can do with ChatGPT or any of the other tools now, the things that we can find out, I think a lot of people want from their managers is something that they can't get anywhere else. So what is unique about that relationship, that give and take, that learning space that you have with someone who's more experienced than you in whatever ways? So I would encourage leader coaches to really think about what within their expertise is going to be helpful for their teams, depending on the makeup of their team, whether they've got people who are very early career who are more experienced, they're going to need to use that expertise in different ways. For some people, it might be not at all or very light touch. For others, it might be more valuable at certain times in their career. I think that expertise can also be a shortcut. If I think about a couple of cases we've used leader coaches internally for recently, it's been in parts of the business that are going through a lot of change. And our internal leader coaches can come in and they know the business, they know the complexities, they know if there's politics, or they might know the background to certain situations. So they can get in and ask the right questions. They can really cut to the heart of what's going on for people very quickly. And that might be bringing a little bit of expertise in. They might not voice the expertise, but they might be using it in the background and in getting to those great questions. So I think those are some of the ways that we start to see a shift in the way that expertise is being used with great leader coaches that is still having a very strong impact, but it's moving away from that, just the tell, the instruction, the kind of regurgitating, this is how it was done in my day, which isn't so helpful at this point.
And it might be just slightly moving along that kind of connect, because what we do know generationally, we have generations now that are expecting coaching and feedback. Unfortunately, they're not going to get the same kind of style of capability build that we might have had, which might have been next to someone. It might have been bumping into each other in conversations in the hall in the office. So there's a capability build, but also an ask for coaching. So I wonder as well, that there's some brilliant expertise that don't feel that it's a hindrance. It can get you to asking even better questions and get you to going, this is my experience of what I did. These are the type of things. What's your view and opinion? And even just by shifting it quickly into getting someone else's perspective, you're creating a level of independence. So I think it's maybe not looking at it sometimes as either or, it's looking at it as how can I layer on top of what's happening already, and ultimately ask, who am I serving here? Is this serving me because it makes me feel good, or actually is this the right time to serve someone else and give them some space to step into?
Yeah. What would you say about the wider influences on a leader? Katy, you touched on it a couple of times about organisational knowledge and the systems and structures within an organisation. In what ways does the organisational culture, or maybe even the societal culture, help or maybe hinder someone who's shifting into more of a coaching style and approach in their leadership?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question that we explore a little bit in the chapter. So things like, what role models have leader coaches had and how did they value their expertise? So if we think of leaders that we've grown up with, how did they lead for us? What did we see? What did our parents do? What did our teachers do? What was their approach? We've got a great example in the chapter of a leader coach in China, and she talks about growing up in a Confucian culture, very much respect for elders, for parents, for authority figures, and that real respect for expertise, and how that's shifting and changing with the generations coming through. So cultural expectations, what we've seen as we've grown through organisations, I think play a big role here. Perhaps what organisational cultures we've grown up in. Have we been in startups? Have we been in very innovative companies where it's been a real culture of feedback, break things, move fast, get lots of feedback, that these kind of behaviours have been very normal? Or have we grown up in a more kind of traditional working culture where perhaps that expertise has been valued. I had an example from, again, quite early on in my career where I worked with a leader in technology, and he said to me at some point, no, I really want you in my leadership team meetings. And I said, okay, fine. Why do you want me in there? And he said, because you are going to bring a different perspective. And I think it's that valuing of different perspectives that is so important now with the different things that we've got going on in the world, the levels of complexity that we're seeing. You know, you can have a ton of technical expertise in the room, but if everybody has the same experience, you're not going to get that diversity in thinking. You're not going to be able to change and innovate. Bringing those different perspectives, I think, is just so important. And it's where leader coaches can play a great role in just asking some really good questions and perhaps shaking up things a little bit in some of those organisations that might not be thinking about that just yet.
Which requires a bit of courage, right? If
Absolutely.
your organisational system or your team system isn't currently one that encourages maybe not having answers and asking big, broad questions, to be the person who does that does require someone to tap into that. Yeah, I love that example.
Yeah, I'd echo the courage and the bravery, because you're almost, so many environments you're conditioned, aren't you? And I think there's a great example of an organisation where there was 4 or 5 incredibly high flyers within this organisation, and they actually mapped them going into different businesses, and they failed because ultimately they'd worked out how to do things around here. And how many organisations now do we know of that are getting leaner? Like the demands are getting quicker, there's less face-to-face time. But ultimately, I think if we chunk up from this tension that we've got at the moment and go, well, actually, we're probably solving more complex problems than we ever have done before. Is it the brightest person in the room who's going to solve all of this? I think it's going to be collective, high-performing teams that come together with diverse thought. And what do we know about teams is if teams really buy in, they need to be heard. And if I'm talking now, you're hearing me, but actually if I ask you a question, then we're all going to get heard. So there's something around how do we start to let some of our hang-ups on ourselves go, that some of the greatest leaders in organisations are not experts, because they ultimately step into a space where they enable others, and you can't do everything. But it's difficult because you're known for it and it feels good, and around your environment everyone's doing the same thing, and sometimes it takes someone to break the mold that actually really shifts and changes a culture. Cultures don't happen just collectively, like one person changes it, 2 or 3 people start to follow. That's a behaviour that works. And that's definitely something I've seen. So hopefully it fills you with confidence of going, yeah, you might take the brave step, but lots of people are going to follow you and you could be a game changer to this.
I think it's just one of those huge opportunities as well for organisations. And I think about the leader coaches that have in the organisation I work in. They all have their day jobs where they have absolute bags of technical expertise, but they also get to play with coaching as well and really see this as a brilliant development area for them. And some of them have gone on to spend a reasonable amount of their time actually coaching within their roles. So I think, again, back to your point, Ross, it doesn't have to be either or. You're in the space of sharing technical expertise and just being in that focused role. That this is a fantastic opportunity to say we're all complex, multifaceted human beings, and we can have these different skills that we play up or play down depending on the different situations that we find ourselves in.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to bring the focus to each of you a little bit, because you've spoken so clearly and with such passion about leaders and leader coaches and how they can do this. What about for each of you right now? How does this balance, this dance of when do I step into my expertise and when do I hold back? How's that showing up for you in your work and your life at the moment?
Yeah, Ross and I have worked together. I know I have a very strong tendency when I'm under pressure or when I've got a lot on to move into that, not necessarily sharing expertise, but more of a directive style. So it's something I definitely have awareness of, but it's that constant journey of, okay, come back to the coaching approach. Hang on, what am I using here from my toolkit? I think that's the beautiful thing about coaching. You're never done with learning. There's always something new and interesting. And I'm getting a lot more interested in the role of coaches and the role of the coaching community to help navigate the complex, multidimensional challenges that we're working through in the world today. So yeah, it's fascinating. And I think it's just so much opportunity there.
Always learning is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Always work in progress.
Yes.
What about for you, Ross? How does this show up right now for you in the work that you're doing?
We'll get there eventually. It's interesting. So probably the time for me to reflect is the time that I was working with Katy, because being in-house in an organisation, I think I've experienced the breadth of coaching in so many spaces. And the space I operate now is I get to purely coach. So I get to step into the space of pure coach, and people are expecting that of me. I think when you're actually working within an organisation, just how different it feels, how many tensions there are at play, because ultimately I think I found, certainly in-house, I was rewarded for output delivery. So why would you not continue to do those things? And it takes you to be brave, courageous, to step back and go, okay, so let's start to see the bigger picture here. If I go down this path, what impact do I have on others? So I think the dance is such a good way of framing it. And I now recognize, I think, for all the leaders that are listening into this, this is about making it real. You've got so many brilliant skills to be able to use. Hopefully, as you read the chapter, you start to maybe just ask yourself some questions of how much am I getting in the way of coaching? And I recognize myself, I've got in the way of myself coaching so many times. But just start with me to start with. And then if I can start to unpick, why do I need to give the person the answer? Actually, because it makes me feel good and it makes my status. Why is that important? That's not going to serve me well in the future. I love the idea of a dance, and there are a number of steps that we can pull out, and it's just working out which is the right one at the right time. And I would say just take your first step, just give it a go, and then just notice. Habit change is difficult, but actually once you start to get some good feeling yourself and some other people get some good feeling, you start to feel it around your team. It becomes really different. So I'm on the always learning camp, but I think I really appreciate the tension that everyone probably listening into this is under. Just take your time.
Because we're in it too, right? We're not coming at this as expert who's got the answers. Question for both of you to wrap up this, which we've covered so much area, which I hoped and knew that we would. But one piece of advice and one question that you would share with a leader who's wanting to really grapple with this topic. Ross, what would that piece of advice and that question be from you?
My question, I think, would be, I'll just ask yourself, who is this serving? So I think that's where I get to in my head. And actually, the moment I have that question planted, it just gives me a couple of seconds to actually just reflect and then make a choice of what I'm doing, rather than just going into automatic pilot, who is this serving? I think is something that's been really important for me. And a bit of advice. I remember I worked with an Olympic coach, and he had a philosophy that was, where am I and where are they? So what he would always do is he'd always just question himself and go, what kind of state am I in? There's going to be times that you're not going to feel like the right state to coach. Start with that first, and then where are they? What do they need? And I would probably even go slightly different to that now, and I go, who am I and who are they? So just my advice would be, start with yourself. Just take a little bit of time just to reflect and go, these habits, these behaviors that I'm just constantly doing, what impact are they really having? How do they serve me in 10 years' time? They're probably serving you in the short term, but actually just start to take some time to build that capability. And good luck to all the leader coaches out there. You're doing an amazing job.
Katy, what pearls of wisdom and question would you leave our listeners with?
Very similar vein. So I think don't wait for the perfect time to use your coaching capabilities. I truly believe that not everyone can be or wants to be a professional full-time coach, but everybody can coach. And it's a skill for everybody, whether you're managing a team, whether you're an individual contributor. There are skills that you can learn that can have an impact on others and for your own development as well. Don't wait for the perfect time. Start using those now and start small. Just equip yourself with, even if it's a few great questions to open up conversations and some curiosity. Start from there. And my question I would invite leader coaches to think about is, what does your team need from you as their leader?
Great questions to end this conversation. And it's just occurred to me that the three of our listeners probably don't appreciate we're across 3 different continents right now and 3 different time zones, Canada, the UK and Australia. And that has really evoked for me the experience of writing this book for the last 3 years. It really has been a global team collaboration. Thank you both so much for this conversation today, where we've covered so much ground. And I know there's so much that you've written about in your chapter that we've not touched on as well. So would really encourage anyone listening who wants to know more to take a look, get a hold of the book. And just thank you for the last 3 years as well in just trusting the process and coming together and creating something that I hope will be a really valuable resource for leaders in organizations. So thank you both so much. And thank you for listening. And I hope you join us next time, where we'll be digging into another chapter within the book, which is all about how leader coaches can use their coaching skills more formally in an organization. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. To help you develop your coaching expertise, you can also explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, member benefits, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events featuring thought leadership, tools, models, and the latest industry trends.